Well, nothing like a little bit of off-season talk show fodder here. And what's more off-season talk show foddery than ranking position groups? I know, we're scraping the barrel here. We're not scraping the bottom of the barrel. It's only like July 9th. And we got plenty of time before training camp starts. But like the reality is we're just sort of influenced by what happens. So when there's a decommitment, we're going to talk about that stuff for a little bit. And I actually think yesterday, if there was a point to yesterday's podcast, it wasn't that, they keep losing decommitments. It was actually that this is just what happens. So I wouldn't get too worked up about it or too upset about it. They're going to lose decommitments. I actually put a lot of stats and data and information on that on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. So if you want to check that out, I think you'll find it interesting. Not just of how often they lose decommitments or how sort of consistently you've got those decommitments year after year, and it happens at just about every school, but also kind of what happens to those players and also what happens to the guys that Pitt signs, because the reality is a lot of guys end up in the transfer portal overall. I think from the June official visits, up until, the guys who were freshmen last year, so the class of 2024 back to the class of 2019, I want to say of the players who committed to Pitt in June and signed with the Panthers, something like 42% have already ended up in the transfer portal. It's just what happens. It's just how it goes. But, we'll have plenty of time to talk about the transfer portal and transfers and decommitments and all that. Well, we're done with decommitments for now, at least. We'll have plenty of time to talk about transfers and the transfer portal and all those different things. Let's get into a little bit of position group rankings. All right, we'll talk about offense today. We'll talk about defense today. There's basically 5 position groups on the roster on each side of the ball. 5 on offense, 5 on defense. How do they rank? What are the best position groups? 5. We'll count them down 5 to 1. I think you could probably guess where I'm at with number 5. You might even guess where I'm at with number 1. Actually, you might, if you've listened to enough of these podcasts or read enough of the stuff that I've written, you probably have an idea of where all these groups rank. But let's run it down. Let's rank the position groups on offense heading into the 2025 season here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's Tuesday, or no, it's not Tuesday. Did I say Tuesday before? It's the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. How can I forget that today's Wednesday? We have our live stream tonight. We always look forward to doing that. That's at 8:30 p.m. right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You want to make sure you don't miss that. So like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then you'll be you can turn on notifications. You get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live or post new content. And of course, check out the website Panther-Lair.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, Pitt transfers, Pitt everything. We cover it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have the message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are hanging out on the message boards talking about Pitt sports. Panther-Lair.com. All right, let's rank the position groups. And understand when we're ranking the position groups, right, whether we're doing offense, defense, whatever we're doing, we're basically looking at 3 main criteria, right? You're talking about returning production, you're talking about depth, and then you're just talking about overall talent, like high-end talent, like a pound-for-pound comparison. If it's a position like quarterback and you have a stud quarterback, well, you might have 2 or 3 really good offensive linemen, but that one stud quarterback puts you up above other groups. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's a position group on defense that clearly has the top player on the defense, if not the team, and maybe one of the, 2 of the top 3 overall players on the team. And that's going to elevate that group. And so this is what we're talking about when we talk about ranking position groups. We're talking about returning production, we're talking about depth, and we're talking about just sheer overall talent, high-end talent, or how high the talent is, what the ceiling really is for the position group. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. And I don't think it would surprise anyone to know that we don't think all that highly of the tight ends. Pitt's tight ends come in at number 5 for me. There's 5 position groups, right? Quarterback, running back, receiver, O-line, tight end, and tight end comes in at number 5 for me. It's just, I mean no disrespect to Jake Overman and Malachi Thomas. I think those guys have a lot of potential. I think they look like they can be really, I think they can contribute. I don't want to overstate it. I think they can contribute and be solid players. I think Jake Overman, I've said this a million times, proved to be more useful than I expected last year after he really never did much in his career at Oregon State. And I think Malachi Thomas has a pretty high ceiling. As a young guy, he obviously impressed the coaches enough to get on the field a decent amount last year. I think he played in every game, mostly on special teams, but had a little bit of run at tight end. But, it just doesn't. This group just doesn't jump off the page. And their one transfer addition was Justin Holmes, a guy from, Marshall or wherever, who just, was not really a pass catcher, mostly a blocker, and they didn't really keep their tight ends in to block last year. So I don't really know the use or value of a blocking tight end. Max Hunt is here as a true freshman. Maybe he gets a little bit of playing time like Malachi Thomas did last year, but you're really looking at Jake Overman and Malachi Thomas as the contributing tight ends this season, and I don't know where you can really put the expectations for those guys. Pitt's tight ends were probably a little more productive last year than I give them credit for. I think the position group had 57 catches for 504 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think 57 catches was the most for the tight ends in the Pat Narduzzi era. 504 yards was second most, I want to say, and then 6 touchdowns was third most, I think. So by comparison to the other years in the Narduzzi era, it was one of the more productive seasons for tight ends, but that comes with a couple caveats. One, they also threw the ball more than any other year in the Pat Narduzzi era. Two, they had Gavin Bartholomew, who was a primary pass-catching option, and he's no longer there. And so you return to guys who didn't produce all that much last season. You have questionable depth where I don't really know what you have beyond those two guys. And one of those guys we're counting as, that's one of your two guys you can rely on, is a sophomore who saw minimal offensive snaps last year. And so, and then, the high-end talent, I think there's just a real question of what the ceiling is. So in terms of returning production, you got very little. In terms of depth, I don't think you have much to really count on. And in terms of the ceiling and the sheer talent, I think you hope you can be average. And I don't mean to be too down on those guys. If you're going to rank anything, somebody's always got to be last. But I'm pretty down on the tight ends. But I think you've heard me talk about this. Maybe they'll surprise us this season. For number 4, again, probably a group that you wouldn't be surprised to hear me say is the wide receivers. And Kenny Johnson popped up there just as we were segueing into it. I'm looking for that number one guy to emerge. And I sort of felt this way last year, but at least they had Konate Mumfield. Now they don't, and I wasn't entirely convinced that he was a number one wide receiver, sort of in the conventional sense of what you really need to execute a passing offense. But now you don't even have him. And they've brought in a couple transfers. Deuce Spann, that I don't know what you're going to get out of him. He's big, but that has not helped him produce in any other year in his college career, and he's had a lot of them. They brought in Blue Hicks, who certainly has the confidence, and made a splash play in the spring game and had his had a handful of moments at Louisville. But I'm still not sure if he really profiles as the number one wide receiver. The number one wide receiver has to be Kenny Johnson. He's supposed to be the guy. He's getting paid to be the guy. He's gotten offers to go into the transfer portal as if he is the guy. But to this point, through 2 seasons, he hasn't really shown himself to be the guy. Now, that doesn't mean that a guy can't break out and be the man as a junior, but he just hasn't done it yet. And so I look at this group, and I just don't see that big-time playmaker, at least nobody who's emerged yet. And so I have to put it there. So in terms of returning production, I mean, they lost Konate Mumfield. Really, everybody else who produced last year is back, so that's a positive. Kenny Johnson, Raphael Williams, Sincere Lee. You got these guys back, and they produce. So, I mean, that's a positive. The depth, I don't know. It just, I guess there's depth. I mean, you have Johnson, Williams, Lee, Spann, Hicks, Tyreek Robinson, Zion Fowler-El. I guess the depth is kind of questionable there as well. I mean, the true freshmen, Tony Kinsler and Bryce Yates, and 3 freshmen, Cameron Sapp, because he just popped up on the screen there. I mean, those guys could potentially contribute, but if the freshmen are likely to contribute, that says something about your upperclassmen depth, which is not exactly an endorsement of the depth on your roster. So, returning production, fine. Depth doesn't look all that hot. And the ceiling, I don't know where the ceiling is. I know where we keep saying the ceiling should be for Kenny Johnson, but he just hasn't shown it yet. So can't say I'm all that enthusiastic about the wide receivers, I think if that position produces, at least as it stands right now, and look, guys can emerge, guys can develop, guys can have that breakout season, but it sort of feels like any production from the wide receivers is probably going to be driven by strong play at quarterback and the offensive system working. And that's, again, I don't want to be too down on this group. I think there's some potential and some playmakers, but we haven't really seen these guys do it. And so I think there's a lot to be desired, a lot left to be desired with the wide receivers. Number 3 group on the position rankings for the offense, I'm going to go with the offensive line. And this is a group that I'm sort of slowly buying into more and more over the course of the summer. Maybe it's just the boredom of the summer creeping in, or the doldrums of summer creeping in, that I'm buying in more and more on the offensive line. But I think Ryan Baer, if he can get a full season at right tackle, will be pretty good. I think BJ Williams is a nice solid right guard. I think Lyndon Cooper will be a good option at center. I think he'll play well there. And then I think the 3 transfers in some combination of Kendall Stanley, Keith Gouvet, and Jeff Percy are going to fill out that left side nicely. And who knows? Maybe one of those, maybe all 3 of them play themselves into the top 5, and one of them bumps like, a BJ Williams or somebody out of the starting lineup. Either way, I think you've got at least 6 solid linemen, and then some younger guys, some with experience like Isaiah Montgomery or Jackson Brown, who saw some starts last year when Pitt was shuffling things around on the offensive line. Or even guys we haven't seen yet, Ryan Coretta or Caleb Holmes. I think there's potential throughout that group, to have better depth than they had a year ago. And that, we talk about returning production, depth, and overall talent. Depth is as important there as it is at any position. I think I would probably put more weight on the depth factor when talking about how we rank the offensive line and what we think about the offensive line, probably more than any other spot, just because we saw what the lack of depth could do, the kind of havoc it could wreak last year, where the starting 5 was okay, solid enough, but then once they started getting hurt and losing guys, really, it was just Branson Taylor. It just wrecked the whole thing because they didn't have the depth. And so that's the biggest question about this year's offensive line is how that depth comes together. Because, returning production, they've got, Baer, Williams, and Cooper back. Percy, Stanley, and Gouvet have all played. So you've got some experience there. I think in terms of returning production, returning starts, returning snaps, and experience, you're okay. In terms of overall talent, we'll see. Like I say, I like Baer, I like Cooper a lot. And we'll see what the transfers are able to do, and BJ Williams and all that. It's really about, are they deeper this year? And I think they are. I think they are. I think they'll be solid enough, just as solid as they were through the top 5, the starting 5, as they were last year. But they need to build out that depth, and that's what we're really kind of waiting to see. Number 2 position group, and this is one of those sort of pound-for-pound situations. Desmond Reed is good enough to get the running backs into the number 2 spot, even though I have giant questions about everybody behind him. Is Derek Davis going to be healthy at all this season? Is Juelz Goff, can he build on some of the flashes he showed last season? Or any of the freshmen, the 3 freshmen, going to be ready to play? Is a walk-on converted wide receiver from, East Stroudsburg, going to be able to step in and play snaps? I have so many questions about this group, but Desmond Reed is so good, he elevates the whole running back group to the second best position on the offense, I think, and probably a top 3, top 4 position on the team. In terms of returning production, you have Desmond Reed, who is the guy from last year. Almost all the meaningful stats produced by running backs at Pitt in 2024 are back because they were almost all produced by Desmond Reed. He's just that good. He's one of the more dynamic and explosive playmakers in the ACC, and one of the more exciting players we've seen at Pitt in years. I think he really is that special, and as long as he can stay healthy, which is a caveat you offer for every running back, as long as he can stay healthy, I think they'll be in good shape. I think that running game will be good, at least as good as it was last year. You're going to find different things for short yardage, and I think there's a lot of different options that could present themselves there. But in terms of using Desmond Reed as a runner and as a receiver, there are a few guys, I think, in the ACC who are as good as Reed, as being like the complete package of rush and receive, not to mention return, which I think he'll probably do a bit of this season again as well. But I just think he's that good. I mean, he's probably the second best overall player on the team, and that gets your position group to be elevated. So pound for pound, led by one superstar, running back to me is the second best position group on the offense. And of course, that leaves one, and it's the quarterbacks. And it's weird because, I mean, I'm putting the quarterbacks as the number one position group in the offense. I should feel great about this and feel great about Pitt's offense, and yet I have so many questions. And some of those questions are tied to the fact that there are big questions about the running backs, the O-line, the receivers, and the tight ends. Some of it is that I have questions about the quarterbacks. I put quarterback at number one because of the situation, and I'll lay that out in a second. But the reality is I have big questions there as well. So, I think when you look at the quarterbacks, you've got this really ideal scenario where you've got a guy coming back, a returning starter at quarterback who was pretty good throughout the time he was on the field. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't incredibly consistent. He certainly had his ups and downs as a redshirt freshman getting his first playing time in college football. But when he was good, he was really, really good. And you've got him back. That's great. To back him up, you've got a transfer who knows this offense really well because he's played in it for a couple of years and he's got a lot of, so he's had experience. He's been productive in this offense. He knows how to run it. And then your third option, and maybe he's higher than the third option, is a true freshman who came in and impressed everyone in the spring. I mean, you couldn't hear enough positive things about Mason Heinschel in spring camp. Enough that, you start thinking, wait, is he actually going to push Eli Holstein for this starting job? So this is a great situation. Returning starter, veteran with experience, surprisingly good freshman. I mean, you're in a good spot here where I think any one of these three guys can win you football games. But there's big questions. There's questions about, Eli Holstein didn't have a great spring. Maybe that was tied to injury, but can he regain the form that he showed when he was playing really well last season? Cole Gonzalez, lots of experience in the offense, and that's great, but he's not played at the FBS level before. Can he come in and play the ACC level? Mason Heinschel looks like an ex-star quarterback at Pitt, but he's a true freshman. You know what I mean? Can he come in and, even Kenny Pickett had some struggles before he won that Miami game in 2017. And so you have a lot of, I think there's a lot to like about this quarterback situation, not the least of which being that Eli Holstein's going into his second year in the offense and should have a better read on the offense, a better understanding of how to operate the offense. In addition to Gonzalez and Heinschel, I think being good options each for their own reasons. There's a lot to like about this situation. There's a lot of questions too. A lot of question marks that aren't going to be answered until this season really starts, which you could say about a lot of positions. But I think quarterback in particular. So I like the quarterbacks the most. I think I ranked the position group number one, but that comes with question marks for sure. All right, let me know your rankings, either here in the comments on YouTube or on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. How do you rank the position groups on offense? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You heard mine. Number 1, quarterbacks. Number 2, running backs. Number 3, offensive line. Number 4, wide receiver. Number 5, tight end. You agree with me? You think I'm way off? And I've got this completely messed up. I look forward to your comments and your feedback. Don't forget, we have our live Panther-Lair show tonight at 8:30 p.m. here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So tune in for that. Your comments and questions. We'll have a little back and forth with you and me and Jim Hammett from Panther-Lair.com. And then we'll be back again tomorrow for another Morning Pitt. So thanks for watching today. Appreciate it. Make sure you like and subscribe. Have a great Wednesday. We'll see you tonight for the live stream and tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.